plan, but life gets sometimes gets a little messy, but that's okay. Lisa, I really want to start out today by being completely real. I woke up this morning, my brain was like in a fog, and so it didn't, it's like it just didn't click today for me. And when I got up this morning, I'm still feeling a little bit of that fog in my brain. It's just, and so for me in the past, I would have tried to perform through it, like just power through it, and just pretend like nothing's going on and everything like that, and just portray that polished expert. But today's topic is really about substance over performance. So I'm going to show up exactly as that is. So if I stumble through words and you see me starting to stutter, going off on a tangent, like, yeah, that's what happens when Kip gets in the fog. But
Yeah.
so last week or last month, actually, we talked about depth, the that internal foundation that we really all need. And so today we're shifting a little bit to substance, difference between looking like a leader and actually being a leader. We're going to look at why we spend so much energy on performance of leadership and so little time on what's actually true.
Yeah.
So before we dive into any questions, because I got a few for you,
Hmm.
just want to hand off to you to say hello.
Hi, everyone. Yeah. So we felt like, substance over performance was a natural sort of next topic after depth. And I think the important things is like performance, it can be a sticky wicket of expectations. And so you're striving for expectations and you're forgetting or glossing over the depth, the substance, the content of what needs to happen to progress. Um, and so this will be an interesting conversation, I think. Performance is it's not my favorite word.
So yeah, we're not doing theater here, so no
Yeah.
performance, right? uh, all right, so we talked about I almost said depth last month. We talked about it briefly already, as it being really the foundation. But let me ask you: has there really ever been a time where you were delivering these huge results? Everyone is excited, but you've inside, like you felt that whole thing was that a performance shell, right? Like there was real no substance underneath it. What did it feel like when you finally decided to stop pretending?
So that's an interesting question. I think for me, my experience was slightly different. I think because of the roles I held,
Mhm,
supporting the lives of founders,
mhm,
you're dealing with a lot of heavy substance all the time. Um, and for me, it was really hard when they got really excited about something being done or achieved or completed. And I'm sort of looking at it going like, but I just made the bed, like it was, I mean, I never made a bed, but that was just sort of like, it was just a day-to-day thing that I did that, that they were so, I wish I could think of a better example than making the bed because that wasn't something I did. But for me, that was the hard part. And then when I had accomplished something of greater substance, it was it was almost like they didn't get it. Um, it's interesting, right? And so I have a different relationship with this topic, a little bit different, not relationship, but different experience with it.
mhm,
Um, because I don't get caught up in the little things. I take care of them. I take care of them. But I put a lot of effort and energy into all of it because it's all important when you're taking care of somebody's life. So I had to become comfortable with the response to this great achievement or this overzealous thank you for the more mundane things of life, because those were the things that these high achieving people, they couldn't do them themselves. They didn't understand them. It was, you know, it was so so simple that it wasn't something they could sort of wrap their head around. So
Sure.
I had a little bit of a different experience with it. So I had to make substance of those more frivolous things. Frivolous isn't a great word either, but they're the more mundane, where
Okay.
we all sort of take it for granted. So I had to learn to appreciate the value of that in a different way
Hmm.
than I would in my life, because, of course I'm gonna take the groceries in, of course I'm gonna call the plumber, of course. Um, of course you want a reservation for 10 o'clock at this place, of course I'm gonna get it, right? Like, that's just sort of normal,
Hmm.
business, if you will.
Yep.
But there was such an overarching sort of response to it so often because it was the little things that made them the happiest, and I was just like, "But that's sort of life." So mine was a little bit different, but it all comes down to the same thing. Substance is, I think it's a bit subjective because what's substance to
Hmm.
me
Absolutely.
is different to others, as I just sort of,
Yeah, absolutely. And so to them, that substance was more of that appreciation of you taking on those tasks or completing those things, and so that appreciation towards you was showing the substance of them and their appreciation.
yeah,
Whereas if it maybe had just been like, oh, okay, well, you did it, fine, and or not even acknowledging it, right?
right.
That's who they are, and so that makes sense. Okay. um, and yeah, definitely a different experience, I think, and than for me. um and
Well, you dealt with systems,
yeah.
right? You dealt with systems, so substance it looks very different when you're dealing with systems. So how but as we've talked about, you know, sometimes the big project that looks fancy and flashy to talk about and on paper is completely void of substance because you haven't really engaged the end user
Right.
to
Yep.
build it in a way that would be helpful to them. So what's your experience with that then?
um yeah, that really does speak to that idea of big flashy fancy stuff
Yeah.
that supposedly solves all these problems, but in reality, that, like you said, user experience, but not even getting from looking at it from a human perspective. Sure, maybe that took these tasks off my plate, but now I have all of these other tasks and or these other things that I have to do, or it made it even harder. They
Yeah.
thought that automating these things was going to make it easier, but it actually made it harder because you don't understand the steps that I have to go through as the user, as the person performing those tasks.
And I think that's where substance can be subjective, right? If you're a leader or a project manager and you're not close enough to to use a different word, the meat of what you're creating,
Mhm.
you're just looking at what it can do on paper, you're disconnected from the substance.
Right.
Um, so similar to my experience, the things that I did and who I worked for, they were just a little bit disconnected from it, so they appreciated it in a different way.
Mhm.
Um, but if you're talking about companies and building systems, program, implementing things, leaders need to be, in my opinion, like, they need to be in the trenches. I had a conversation this morning, and leaders that aren't in the trenches really don't get to the depth of things. They don't they don't they have a harder time putting the same value on the output because they don't understand the input. They're disconnected from it.
Sure. Yeah. They look at it as a list of tasks, and all they look at is the end result, right? Like what was accomplished. And they don't look at it as, there was 11 steps that we had to go through to get to there. I had to collect 7 different inputs in order to get to that point. And so, right, if they are not in the trenches and understanding that, then yeah, what to me they've lost credibility in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Um,
why I struggle with KPIs so much. It's
yeah.
I understand, but I really struggle with them. They're not. Yeah, we won't go there.
Yeah, that's a topic for a whole nother day because yeah, don't get me on that soapbox. But so let's talk about in your career where you've had to be the hero that fixes any project, right? Anything that goes on in a day-to-day stuff in projects, things, right? When things are when the there I go with the fog in my brain. When things aren't going well, right? And so, where was that specific time or that moment where you went, um, me being the hero for everyone else, fixing everything for everyone else, is actually just being performative, and it's keeping me from being the person that I truly need to be for myself, right? Like if I'm doing too much for everyone else, I'm not
Yeah.
able to do the things I need to be doing, and it's at a detriment to myself, but also to them.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's so many. There are so many examples. Um, I think the biggest one is I was building a house for a family I worked for. Um, it was a enormous project, um, and I became the
I
owner's
never
rep.
knew you were a home builder as well. Like I know you were.
Yeah.
Come on,
I've had multiple careers in my one career.
are you wearing a tool belt right now? Like
Yeah.
what?
Yep, pretty much.
Yeah.
I learned how geothermal work, I've done it all. But so I was building this house. I became the owner's rep. I hired the construction manager or the architects, the whole thing. We had the team, but
Mhm.
I had my full-time job. I ran the business of life, and there were employees, and there were all sorts of other there was a foundation, there was administrative stuff, banking, there was all sorts of things, and building this house was a full-time thing. And I and I had a little kid. My daughter was 3 to like 10, 7, something like that when we built this house. And I don't know how I got through it. It was hard. I do remember we moved them in for Thanksgiving, and we were going on vacation, and my husband was not happy with me when I was in bed by 8 o'clock every night on that vacation. He's like, "We're on vacation, what are you" I'm like, "I can't move." Like, my body just gave out.
Sure.
I just gave out.
Yeah.
Um, and coming back from that was where I really started to have like, I had to separate some things because that was seriously, that was a 7-year project, and I was working, like, 3 full-time jobs. It was 1 job, but it was 3 full-time jobs within it,
Sure.
um, and it was 24/7, and, like, I'd be on the soccer field taking phone calls from the and then having to run it was craziness, and that really, really beat me up, and I suffered, and so did everybody around me because I was just in survival mode,
Sure.
and
Absolutely.
nobody performs well in survival mode, in my opinion.
It's not sustainable, right?
Yeah.
The idea of being, that's essentially you're talking 120 hours a week, 3 full-time jobs.
Yeah.
It's not sustainable, and
It's not, and,
what
like
cost is are you doing that, right?
right, and, like, I advocated for myself. I said I needed help, and I was met with, "You don't need help, you're Lisa." Y
Yeah.
and, like, you have to and this was I was in my mid-30s, right? You have to reconcile this, like, on the one hand, I'm like, "Wow, they think I'm that valuable," and on the other hand, I'm like, "They have no respect for me," and it was really
Mm.
this hard thing to reconcile. You know,
Right.
it was really, really hard. Yeah, so, you know, you find yourself in situations and even when you advocate for yourself, it's hard to get out of them sometimes because, that substance thing that people have their own idea, their own definition, they place their own value on it,
Hmm.
and sometimes you can't no matter what you do, you can't push back against it.
Right. Huh. So
Yeah.
when I'm ready to build my cabin, I can call you. I have this dream someday. I'm building a cabin up in the mountains and
I'm
doing
happy to be a
it.
sounding board, but I will not take that project on.
All right, that's fair. That's fair.
Well, let
That's
me let me ask you,
yeah.
how about, with have you ever been in a position where you're delivering, the results in the systems world that you built and you managed and created, and you felt like it was a shell of who you were because you knew that the product
Sure.
didn't have the substance in it because it was the flashy project that didn't get the end user input in the development phase. And here you are putting all this effort and energy, and you're gonna put this thing out, and did you ever have a project where you're like, "Oh, this is gonna, like, blow up or fall flat because it's flashy on paper, and
Mhm.
in reality, it's gonna be a hard one to get end user adoption."
Absolutely, and not even from a systems or technology perspective, but back in the day, I'll say the employee surveys, right? And what are
Ugh,
we going to do with these, and right? And so um, I had the responsibility of kind of owning that project of getting this survey out, getting the results, compiling some feedback, and coming up with a very distinct a very specific action plan that we're going to do these things over the next 12 to 18 months, and we're going to accomplish these things. And so I spent weeks doing this, night and day, weekends, just like you were saying, right? But I only had one job, so luckily I was able to focus just on that. But when you're looking at a survey of 150 questions, it's really hard to
oh,
measure anything of value when
yeah,
when you're going through that many types of questions. And um, yeah, gosh, I put together like a 30-page summary and write like an action plan and specifics and who need to be involved and da 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 da. And because it didn't get championed from the right people, it fell flat, and we didn't make it past month two of this action plan that I spent you know hundreds and hundreds of hours putting together. And like, for what? And the next year when that came around, I raised my hand and said, I'm the last person you want to do this, because I got burned out, and
yeah,
I can't do that. I believed in what I was doing. I believed in this action plan that I put together and these activities that needed to be accomplished. And for them to just get, brushed aside and be like, oh, we don't have time for that. Or, we're going to focus on other things, or we don't have the budget for that. Those kinds of things. It was like, you spent a lot of money in my time and my salary to do those things, to come up with this stuff. And now you're just like, not even going to give it a chance.
so how did that end up impacting you as a professional? Like, you know, to your point, you believed in what you were doing, you put tons of hours into it and effort into it. I mean, that kind of shakes your confidence, plays with your
Oh man.
sense of like, what you're contributing. I mean, how did that impact you? What did
Yeah, it was like getting kicked in the gut, right?
Yeah,
Like, what did you just do? What did you spend all that time on? It clearly didn't hit the mark because nobody bought in on it. And
do you
uh,
think it didn't hit the mark? Because, or do you think they just were throwing out this thing we need to do because we should, without really thinking about what would be beneficial and what would really be helpful to the organization, right? Like,
yeah,
so many times it's like, we should be doing this. and it's a mismatch with what the organization needs. And my experience, again, it's a little bit the leaders are not in the trenches enough. They're not really paying attention. They're not really listening. They're
Yep.
following someone else's playbook, ticking things off their list,
Hmm.
but they're not appreciating the depth of it or the
Hmm.
substance of it, and what and not really seeing what the potential value in it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And to this day, I'm a little jaded about the idea of employee surveys, probably because of that.
Yeah,
And this happened 15 years ago, right? Um, and so I'm very apprehensive about the concept of them. And I've been an advocate of, you got to do it right. You got to actually do things with it. And I've got burned since then doing these types of surveys and coming up with a plan. So um, I certainly didn't put in as much effort this last time around because of that. Because I was like, well, if I know nothing's going to come of this, then um, I'm not going to break my back. I'm going to make sure that my team is taken care of, and my department is taken care of, and we're doing things with internally.
yeah.
But from an organization perspective, it's really hard to get over that.
So how do you think we get leaders who come up with these ideas and set these initiatives and these mandates? How do we help them? Or if we are the leaders, what do we need to do to, you know, be more invested in these initiatives to see them through to fruition, in a meaningful way that really can make a difference in an organization? Because I agree, I've never seen an employee survey done well, and I've
Right.
never seen the data from an employee survey do anything.
Um, no, I'm with you there. I've never experienced it have a positive effect on an
Yeah,
organization, and that's part of the disheartening thing for me
yeah,
is like, you're asking for feedback, you're asking for insights from your employees and your teams, but then you're just checking the box. It's a check the box activity,
yeah.
and why
Goes in
waste.
the archive folder.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. And then guess what? We're just going to do it again in 2 years.
Yeah,
And if it takes you 6 months to get all of it together and come up with the results and come up with the action plans, and like by then those challenges, those red flags that came up could be non-issues at that point. So,
yeah,
um, yeah, the idea of employee surveys is a whole nother topic that I could talk about for hours, because it's not my favorite thing, but that one really did burn me, and it really frustrated me, and it did make me question my own competence,
yeah,
right? And so when I do things, it's with a little bit of apprehension, especially when it's something I'm you know not 100% bought into. There's definitely
mhm,
some apprehension about doing it,
mhm,
until I fully understand, like, is this really going to make it, is this going to move the needle, right?
yeah,
The buzzwords of move the needle idea,
yeah,
is it going to? And if it doesn't, then I want to find a way to either make it move the needle or shift it a little bit to where we can make that positive,
yeah.
that
Yeah,
positive.
no, I've definitely taken the approach of if I'm doing something, involved in something, I want the autonomy to be able to see it through to the end, whatever that means, um, because I want to be part of that team or that committee or
Hmm.
whatever it is that, takes the effort and takes the project and does something with it. And that doesn't mean every project and every survey and everything has to be seen all the way through. There are times you do get to a point and you realize this was not right and you could call it. But that's where I think you just transparency with the team goes a
Yeah.
long way.
Yes.
You
Yes,
know,
absolutely. Making that pivot at the right time, or, whether it's canceling the project or going in a different direction. Yeah. And
yeah,
that transparency is critical. So,
yeah.
I know we need to wrap up in a couple of minutes here, but I do want to ask one last question of you.
Okay.
Um, when you feel yourself wavering, right? Like struggling with that, I gotta perform. I gotta do these big things. I gotta do all this fancy stuff. How do you pull yourself back to the substance of who you really are?
I check in with my values.
Okay.
I check in with my values and I listen to my, literally I listen to my body. My body holds it all, right? And if I'm feeling that tension in my chest or like that butterflies in my stomach, like that's anxiety, and that tells me I'm not in alignment. And then I check in with my values, and then I'll voice it. I'll voice it in a way that as clearly as I can, so that it can be received with the intent that it's meant to, that it's being delivered with.
Incredible. I
So
would love to get to that point of having that physical trigger to say, "Hey, dummy, you need to right. Something's got to change here." And I guess it has in the past, but not you know not that I've really noticed it significantly recently. So, but that's cool. I like it.
yeah.
Fantastic.
Your body holds it, your body holds everything. For me anyway. So, yeah, you'll get there. If it makes you raise an eyebrow, that might be another thing. If somebody's telling you something and you're kind of like, "What?" That might be your tell.
There you go. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
shout because
Well, look, real leadership is not having all the answers, right?
exactly.
Progress is when you have integrity to stop performing and start being the same whole person in any room you're in. And that is something that takes effort and intention, and don't beat yourself up if it doesn't happen all the time, because we all slip. Um, but it's a journey. It's not about perfection, it's about messy action. So as you head back into your week, ask yourself one question. Are you spending energy on how you are perceived, or are you focusing on what is actually true? We'll see you next time as we keep going beneath the surface.
Right on. Thank you. Have a
Thank
good week,
you.
Lisa.
You too. Thanks.